This painting is called the Madonna of the Pomegranate. Paintings were very expensive back in the Renaissance from the top masters. In fact, some paintings cost as much as houses, and that's why the Medici family was able to afford this, because they were so wealthy. They financed the War of the Roses in England, and they were also financiers to the Pope. Here it's thought that we have the Medici children, and that the Madonna is painted as Lucrezia Medici, who was the wife of Lorenzo, and she was actually from Rome, and she had tuberculosis, but it wasn't known before her marriage because she was from another city that she was ill, and she lived for quite a while after her marriage, but not in very good health, and Lorenzo eventually contracted tuberculosis from her, and he had tuberculosis of the bone, which is an extremely painful disease, and it finally killed him in his 40s. Seeing this painting in the Uffizi Gallery is really an amazing experience, because all of the gold color in the clothing and on people's hair are actually done with 24 karat gold leaf, and as you stand there and look at it and you move slightly with the movement of your breath, the gold highlights scintillate, and it's really a lovely experience. This is a painting of Mars and Venus. It could be called Venus Conquers Mars, because if we look on the left, we have a lovely Venus reclining, and on the right we have a passed out Mars also reclining, and in between them are two little satyrs who are generally representing lust in Greek mythology, and one of the satyrs has Mars's helmet on, and he has Mars' lance under his arm, and another little satyr is helping him with the lance. And if we look at the little satyr in the far right hand corner of the painting, the lower right, he's crawling through Mars's cuirass, through his armor. And we see that there is a conch shell that's being blown by a third satyr who's right next to Mars's ear, and in spite of this loud noise, he doesn't rouse. It's a funny painting, and it's also very beautiful. Here we have the Primavera, which is the Italian word for spring. This painting was commissioned by a different branch of the Medici family on the occasion of a wedding. And here in the center, with the white dress and the red cloak, we have Venus presiding over this garden of love. And on the far right, we have a character, Zephyr, who's pursuing Chloe, and this is considered a personification of lust. Next to them we have Flora, covered in flowers, who represents the happiness of marriage. And then on the other side of Venus we have three ladies dancing, which are the three Graces dancing, and the middle Grace is looking at the man on the left, and it's thought that the middle Grace is representing Semiramide, who is the bride of the man who's portrayed on the left, who is Piero Medici, who's a member of the Medici family, but a different branch than Lorenzo. And Piero is representing the god Mercury, because he has winged feet, and he's got the cadeus of Mercury, which he's using to look through the trees up into the heavens, and this is considered divine love. So we have a representation here going from right to left of profane love, married love, and then divine love. And up at the top, above Venus, who's presiding over all this, is her son, Eros, or Cupid, who's shooting an arrow into the heart of the bride. This is another life-size painting, and it's also in the Uffizi, and it's a very dramatic and wonderful work of art, and I hope you get a chance to see it sometime. I'm going to talk about another painter from the same period of time, the late 1400s, early 1500s. Her name was Onorata Rodiana. This is not her work. We don't have any examples of her work that we know of, because she was working on some frescoes in Cremona in the north of Italy, engaged to do so by the Marquis Gabriano Fandolo to decorate his palace. And while she was working on this series of paintings, she was approached by one of the people in the palace who had tried to rape her, and in order to get away from him, she killed him with her knife. This was back in the days when women often had a weapon or two secreted on their person, and it wasn't too hard with those big dresses. And then she had to flee in the middle of the night because she had killed this person, and so she dressed herself as a man in order to escape unobserved. And it wasn't long before she joined up in the countryside with a group of condottieri, soldiers who were on campaign, and so she signed up as a soldier, and she traveled around with them for a number of years, and eventually came back to Cremona and was wounded in a battle there, and it was discovered then that she was a woman, and she did die from those wounds. And before she died, she was heard to say, "Honored I lived and honored I died." And of course her name is Onorata Rodiana. So we have a picture of Joan of Arc here to commemorate Onorata, and hopefully one day her paintings will come to light. Maybe they're still in that palace up in Cremona under a lot of paint and plaster. Now we have the painter Raphael. He was born in 1483 and died in 1620. Didn't live really long, but he was a very popular painter at the time, known mostly for these kinds of religious works. This work has these little angels at the bottom that were on pillows and all kinds of things recently. This lady at the top was called Flor De Nadia. She was a baker's daughter, and he used her for a model quite a number of times. And the character on the left here in the gold robes is the Pope. Here we have a self-portrait of Raphael, painted as a young man. You can see he was a very handsome young man. He was much admired for his good looks. He also had a nice disposition. He was very popular, and one time when he was in Rome working for the Pope, he ran into Michelangelo, and Michelangelo saw him with his entourage of admirers and friends walking down the street, and when they met, he said, "Oh, there you go, about town like a prince with your entourage." And Raphael was said to have quipped back at Michelangelo, "Well, there you go alone, like the hangman." Michelangelo wasn't known for his sweet disposition, although he was a great artist. Here we have a Raphael portrait of Agnolo Donati. He was a wealthy man, and this was actually a wedding portrait. And here you see the other wedding portrait of the other party to the marriage, his wife. There were lots of portraits that were done like this, where the couples were painted in two different panels facing each other. This is a portrait of Baldassare Castiglione. He wrote The Book of the Courtier, which was a manual of advice for people who wanted to conduct themselves with decorum, and it was filled with interesting bits of advice, like if you have to blow your nose, don't do it on your sleeve. He was an ambassador to the Pope from the court of Urbino, which is how he came to know Raphael, and he died of the plague. This is a portrait of Bindo Altaviti. He was a banker in Rome and a very wealthy man, so he was able to commission this portrait. At first glance, it may look like it's a woman, in part because his hair is long and his lips are red, but there's also a certain self-consciousness to his pose that we're used to associating with portraits of women